Never did I think he was going to actually take his life. I wish I would have realized signs of suicide, but I guess in the moment didn't want to really believe it. My mother adopted all of us. We had total 33 kids. That's basically your friends. We had a closeness. When he was home, he was like my workout buddy. When he was 7, 8 years old, he had an 8-pack. This kid was crazy good. But there was no backpack actually. To our understanding, there was no person, because they said that person that they couldn't find for 3 years, that person was then deported. When he came home, obviously he was different than when he had left. They like to say paranoid, and I don't like to use the word paranoid. When you're being attacked constantly, or when you're being tortured repetitively, it's not a paranoia, it's a fear, it's a justifiable fear. The guy that beat up Khalif on video, he lied on paper and said Khalif tried to escape. He had mittens on, handcuffed at the hands and feet. How was he escaping? He had to be 130 pounds, and he's only 5'4". He is not a threat, nowhere near it. He spent over 320-something days in solitary confinement.
What they did, they took my brother from me. How many of us freak out and get our attitudes before we can?
I started a campaign to see if we can make a change.
Never give him a second chance.
Plea deal, because he just couldn't take any more abuse.
2 states to prosecute 16-year-olds as adults.
If you're black or brown or Hispanic, it's going to happen to your kid, your relative, or somebody. The Khalif Browder bill bears his name because he represents not just himself, but all the kids that are being tortured and basically who's being deterred from having their right to a speedy trial being heard or having it happen. People can help out with by signing the petition, agreeing that yes, this needs to stop. To shut down Rikers represents a change that the public needs to see. I mean, we're tired of our kids or loved ones or ourselves being incarcerated, and then you come home and you can't get a job, or being incarcerated and you come home and you can't live back where you used to. Changing their thoughts on how America condemned blacks and Hispanics is the way to start.
Good evening. The United States is finally recoiling from mass incarceration crisis intervention that has plagued it for half a century. The world's largest incarcerator has seen a small drop in prison numbers since 2008. However, the rate of decline is so slow that it will take half a century for incarceration rates to reduce to historical levels. Further, the drop in prison numbers has occurred against the backdrop of piecemeal reforms, and there is no meaningful systematic mechanisms to reduce incarceration levels. Despite this, there is now, for the first time, a growing public acceptance that prison is problematic, possibly flawed. Prison is a problematic, possibly flawed sanction. Prison is expensive, inflicts serious unintended suffering on incarcerated people, and profoundly damages families. Alternatives to prison are finally being canvassed. The way that we deal with serious offenders has not meaningfully changed for more than 500 years. During all this time, we have simply locked offenders behind high walls. The way we deal with people who have caused serious harm has been more resistant to scientific and technological advances than any other aspect of society. The most radical suggestion regarding prison reform is to abolish prisons. Prison abolition has been a theme in some limited academic quarters for many decades. It had never received anything approaching mainstream credibility as a reform option, but this is now changing. Prominent politicians, social groups, university organizations, and mainstream media commentaries have recently advocated for prison abolition. This proposal is no longer a fringe idea. It has gained considerable currency, particularly in light of the dual society-changing phenomena of the COVID-19 pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement. Here with us tonight is one of the forerunner advocates for abolishing prisons with his organization and allies, successful in moving towards the closing down Rikers Island, the infamous jail in New York City. Mualimm-AK is an abolitionist, human rights defender, mental health advocate, the 2021 David Prize winner, CEO and executive director of Incarcerated Network. Is a 2016 Columbia University scholar and consultant to the United Nations Subcommittee on Torture. The ACL Human Rights Defender and TRUA Human Watch Rights Defender. Has spent 12 years inside of a prison and almost 5 years in solitary confinement. Is what I consider the Beyonce of reform, but he is also someone who has been a true trailblazer in making change in our country as it relates to the inhumane systems that we have. Without further ado, let me add my co-host, Makini Marsden.
Hi, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank
And
you for
Mualimm.
Congratulations on the David Prize.
Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you for congratulating me. I'm sorry. Thank you for that gracious intro, Lulu. So much of this work comes from a need basis. The David Prize is an amazing new sort of way of philanthropy. Heard about it last year. One of my students won, and he was doing urban farming and compost growing. And they approached me this year, and I won. But it's based on if you were doing work in structuring better New York City, if you have different ideas or things that are working to help improve the city, and maybe you're not, looking after monetary value, but the type of person you are. And so I'm just honored to win, and I'm humbled to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, most definitely. I'm so, just as someone, and just like a short synopsis on my connection to Five. I saw Five speaking on a different platform, and just somebody being heavily involved in this work. I was like, man, I'm on a prowl for a mentor. And so I'm like, hey, he mentioned a couple of different things that I knew someone who was connected to. And I said, listen, can you get me connected to Five? And to be honest, just speaking with you the first few times, I was like, oh, I done met the Beyonce of, criminal justice change. I'm just excited and telling people because it's an honor to be around someone who's humbled, who has gone through quite an experience, and who continues to devote his life daily to creating work that will change the way that we live our lives and the way that our country is formed and founded. And so, I'm very grateful and honored to have you with us today. Thank you for being here. It's definitely a pleasure.
No, but I'm honored. I love your work. Your drive is amazing. I think that this country has a lot to fear from you when it comes to oppression, but those who are directly impacted love you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, most definitely. So today our topic is focused around an overview of the penal system, a failed social experiment. So no one better to discuss that than you. So if you do you want to just open us up with something as you?
Yeah, I love the piece that you played. One, I have a personal space in my heart for Innocence Project. That's how I came home. They do amazing work. The Central Park 5, as you know, but also so many others. There's actually like a franchise now almost. There's Innocence Project in every state. At one point in time, the government was using DNA to sort of further convictions, and the Innocence Project came up and challenged them. And actually, they were like, we think actually more people are going to be exonerated than those people are going to be convicted or proven a crime. And of course, Khalif and my comrade Akeem, I met Akeem throughout this work. His mom, when Khalif Browder had his family was going through these circumstances, from that to doing a film with Weinstein and Jay-Z and them, and helping the family sort of advocate and organize. And then, of course, the film and the series was sort of the work that we do. It's such a predatory system that shows Khalif's sort of life as an example, but there's so many Khalifs, as Akeem says.
Yeah.
He now has the Khalif Browder Foundation, which, of course, we do workshops and work and train with other youth as well. So an amazing atrocity this country tried to wash over, as if this is not the regular system of oppression. Khalif's story is a story of so many youth today related to Emmett Till, in which the time when he was accused of whistling at a woman, which of course was false, and they beat him to death where they tortured him. This is the same punishment system that's pervasive against our youth, but the state profits off of that with incarceration, and that's sort of like how Khalif is an example of so many millions of youth in this country. When you think of the prison industrial complex, a lot of people don't understand it because it has so many components. Lulu, it has so many pieces. You have solitary, you have pre-trial hearings, you have crime units, you have private corporations that invested in, you have property which are made inside a prison by people who are state property. And whenever you have something that is sort of like this evolutionized version, you think of it as this giant mountain of a rock, which is slavery. And over time, it has been chiseled into this, performance-looking art piece that people glare at called the prison industrial complex. It is a complex of systems and businesses and corporations that profit off of it. A lot of us in the hood, our kids go to public school. We fill out that form for them to eat lunch, right? And it's sort of because we get federal funding for us as citizens within a state. That same system is just like prison. It's just like a welfare system, right? That same business that's delivering packets of mustard, packets of ketchup, Cisco systems, which is delivering nationally to schools and Department of Education, is also delivering to the Department of Corrections. And so they're making profit. So your husband who's in prison is also getting a pack of mustard, a pack of relish, and a pack of condiments and other things that are useful for their stay because they're limited to only buying from these companies. That creates another company. So it's all of these sort of pockets. To the point that, like a lot of people might have seen the 13th doc they did with Ava DuVernay. So a lot of our national council members was a part of a documentary called the 13th doc, which sort of breaks down the sort of financial leechness of society and corporations onto impacting society, but from the prison industrial complex. Businesses and corporations actually changing laws that benefit them. And so they can make a profit. A lot of them are patronizing the prison system. But when we think of the prison industrial complex, we don't see how it permeates through all of our lives, through the fashion that we buy, like Victoria's Secrets and McDonald's and all the other merchandise that are made with forced labor that we pay for. Yeah, Starbucks packaging, right? I remember when I did state property exhibit, we traveled that across the country, and a lot of law students wrote a lot of briefs around it and a lot of papers, but the attention changed their format of doing business. They just basically opened another company and then contracted to the prison. But before, they were contracting directly from the prison. Victoria's Secrets, everything within each individual state, because there's state, federal, there's private. People think private is the biggest problem. It's really 4% of the problem. It's really the state. It's the normality.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, Rikers Island. I did a piece a while ago called Killing Rikers. It's a huge report, like 4 documentary films in it too. It's sort of like the history of Rikers Island, definite, with Columbia University. My students produced it from Dart Publishing. And it dives into the fact that Rikers was built in 1650. I remember New York was created in 1624, right? And so shortly after, you have Ellis Island being constructed and consummated because it needs to receive people into the world, right? This is where it's sort of the pinnacle point of everybody came in and colonized the state. And then you also have Rikers Island on the other end being built for that same system. Yes, prisons, or the sort of system of centralized prisons, they felt was invented back to the Quakers, but these were sort of religious people who felt what they were doing is inhumane. People went crazy. They just locked people in their cells and said, you'll figure it out. That system itself, New York was like, you know what? That works for us. We'll put one in every prison. We're going to invent waterboarding, the electric chair, all of these sort of punishments that allow for each county. We have 62 counties. I'm just taking one state as a micro to the macro. You have 62 counties in every state. Every state has a state prison. All the counties are named after the prison, which means like the prison was there first. Like Attica was there first. Then people who worked in the town moved there and became the town. Um, that pervasive system led to over 50 facilities in 62 counties that only incarcerate people from 4 to 3 counties,
Wow.
majority,
That's
right?
that's ooh.
Yeah.
I don't think that people really recognize the numbers, just kind of as it plays out. But let me ask you, there's there's a how can I say there's a lot of legislative proposals about abolishing the 13th Amendment, slavery laws regarding those convicted and sentenced for crimes. How
Yeah.
relevant and effective are those proposals in the prison abolition movement? Like, if you're really, a lot of people say that they don't understand how those things correlate. And just because you kind of brought it up, I'm just saying, you know,
Yeah. Well, I mean, one, we have to defend on all levels. Let's just be honest. We have to defend everywhere. It's like the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. We have to defend on all different terrains. And so we also have to use the tools, even though you can't tell in a master's house the master's tools. You still have to use those to dismantle it, right? And so if they're saying by law slavery is legal, we have to challenge them on that. We have to take those administrative actions and forcive actions, right? It's not all going to be solved in a way that's going to be one simple stroke. This is 400 years of embedded history. This is a taking of a nation, of a country, of a land of people, abolishing their history, bringing people while you're abolishing their history to service this land. There's a lot to rebuild from that. And so I don't think personally reprimands is possible. You understand? 400 years is compound interest impossible. This country doesn't even have the value of that,
yeah,
to be honest. And challenging it legislatively is the way to go, to be honest. I just think that it's going to take a massive educational movement because it has to be we the people anytime we talk about anything congressional. It's not going to be civil rights because we tried to do that with the ACLU and other networks on civil rights. But when it comes to constitutional law, you have to then have an agreement from every state. And that's going to take a massive mobilization, right? Because you're talking about 50 different states, 50 different prisons, 50 different ways of doing things, 50 different individual unions. It's like warriors.
yeah,
It's 50 different gangs that all work together called the U.S.
yeah.
You know, we just happen to be like in New York. That's like the Yankee Stadium gang. You know, you know. If you've seen Warriors, you remember those are the dramatic guys.
Yeah,
And so, you know, I think the concept of abolition can happen if it pervasively organizes from state to state. You have to challenge it legally, which means like a lawsuit for damages and claims. And then you also have to challenge it with new legislation, in other words, amending the 13th Amendment, because it's an amendment. Just because it works in favor of one people, which is, I just think the Constitution was a list of white guy perks anyway, it should be amended judiciously and physically if we have to.
yeah. And I think people really don't understand. A lot of people don't understand. So the educational component is big, and obviously
It
that's
is
why
big.
we're here, because once
Be-
once we start to
Because I think
change.
it's about people who have been programmed to purchase items. Like black people are the number one, and people of color are the number one purchaser of items. And these items were made from slavery, building a whole literally postmodern capitalism structure of industrialism is built on the backs of literally on the backs of our people. And I think that it's going to take a stoppage of buying that. Like if we stop going to McDonald's, it's over with for them. But that's not happening because none of the healthy options being put in
Gotcha.
In light of the circumstances, where in this movement have reformers on one end and abolitions on another proposing different strategies and solutions to end mass incarceration? Is there or can there be a junction of cooperative work between the two?
Yes, I do believe so. I'm trying to choose my words very, you know,
Yeah.
very choice. I am a Cub, a first generation Cub, which means my family were Panthers, my parents were Panthers. And so I'm going to say that yes, in order to overthrow the slave master, you need house slaves as well to attack from the inside because they're well in the inside. And so when I mean the difference between abolitionists and reformers is If you take a slave plantation and you have those who are forcefully abused at the bottom level, and then you have people who are put to oversee them, who are trying to convince them to work with them to make the system better and livable for both. You're trying to reform slavery. That is impossible. Right? You cannot reform a system that 100% takes from the people. And so there is a stark difference of reformers and abolitionists. I'm not trying to make the prison better. I'm not trying to say I'm just going to cut 50 prisons or cut the prison population by 50 and that's it. Like, let's just cut half of slavery. Like, some of it's cool, but like not all of it. Like, we'd be going a little too far. No, I don't feel that way about it. I feel like abolition is also transforming a system into a facility or a place of higher learning and higher education. If you make a mistake, you go here to learn better. That is common sense. Like, it's literally in the Wizard of Oz 13 chapter books. Like, that's how they run a complete society. You need to, and people need to stop thinking that we need jails and prisons make us safer and that we just got too many of them. No, the entire system is a perpetual punishment for people of color and costs us all money. You know, I think that it's the constant evolution of technology, but also the decimation of information education that's getting people average knowledge ratio a little bit higher than what it used to be. So a lot more people know now, like, oh, like everybody was poor whites and slaves as well, poor whites and poor blacks. And in Jamestown, they used this sort of a negative racial terminology of overseer, and one is overseeing the other. And so they were held back where this country needed to make money to grow. And then a couple hundred years after that, they held blacks back while they allowed whites to own property and have these other sort of benefits of being American citizens. And so honestly, everybody gets duped, right? And they created these caste systems. And it's when those two people, poor whites and poor blacks, unite, then there will be no need for a prison system. There will be no need for a punishment-based model. Punishment doesn't work. It teaches you how to avoid the punishment, and it creates caste systems, mostly predominantly people of color, because it's an extension from slavery. And so, no, I don't believe there's any room for collaboration if you're trying to make a better jail and I'm demolishing the jail.
Mm-hmm. So what do you say then? I mean, and you know, and people can agree to disagree, right? But
Right.
What do you say to the person who wants to know about the person who brutally murdered or, you know, wronged their loved one? How do you because that's the biggest argument, right? That people who are reforming the mindset in you know the concept of reform versus the concept of abolition. Now, me personally, I feel like every one of those people, whether you're an abolitionist or a reformer, you're bringing the the conversation to the table that it hasn't been brought to the table in quite some time, 500 years to be exact, right? And so I think that we're getting to a place where we're colliding as far as concept is concerned, in regards to abolition versus reformists. However, how do we speak to the violence that has happened to a person, and then how do we work together, you know, in cohesion?
Right. Well, brick by brick, and this is why I always say that even to abolitionist comrades and some of the elders who just don't budge on their position. Brick by brick, we have to work with everyone. I feel like I'm always going to do 110%. If you're doing 10%, that is great. I'm so grateful you're doing 9% more than a person who's doing nothing, right? And so a 1%. And so for that, I think there's all room for all work. What reform does is it sort of puts in this work of changing the system, adjusting it so that the system works better. The system is taking from the people, charging the people, overcharging the people. Is actually a holistic way of transforming people's lives that is cheaper. The violent and actually small amount of massive murderers and Hannibal Lecters and people so crazy you got to keep them like caged up, or they just like jump up and bite your face off is a small amount. It is definitely not 2 million Black and Latino men and women, majority men, and growing rate of women. And so when you look at who's being captured, who's being punished, the dichotomy of race and barrier starts to shift to one side, right? The amount of people who are committing those violent acts has to also, because prison abolition has to come with, and maybe I didn't mention this, which is a really critical part. it has to come with your idea about preserving life and human rights. You cannot have human rights and talk about abolishing the prison system. Let me just say that. You cannot talk about human rights and still charge people for addiction, charge people for pain, charge people for punishment, punishing them more for punishment, or the fact that we still live in a country that we kill people to show that killing people is wrong. That has to be a preservation of life. Once a law enforcement's job is not to kill you or the perpetual end is end of your death, so I'm just cutting off that cost that it costs to keep you for a while, then we kill you just by murdering you straight out. We can actually preserve life for the future. That should be their duty. Other countries have done it. When they've decriminalized drugs, they've also ended the death penalty. And so there is no end when we murder you. So everything is preservation. Building that is far from the sort of system that we have now, where it's totalitarian rule, police and other law enforcement are permeating even to our school. When I was young, community insurance officers, and now it's like everywhere that people are vulnerable. In my city, the shelter is even the police, right? And so even when you're at your worst, you have nowhere to go and you need help, you still have this bombardment of control and totalitarian rule. And so with that, you have an increase, then you would have a recognition of mental health, which is like, I would say 80%, but it's like 60% of the prison population, right? And then you have those who are also reoffending because no person has ever done jury or had a jury that appears if it was a second offense. And so by these changes, you're shrinking the prison system down to a containable or understandable amount of people. So yes, there is violence. Yes, there is violent crime. But what do we look at as violence?
Yeah.
I look at kids starving as violence. I look at inequality as violence. I look at the fact that by the color of your skin depends on how this traffic stop is going to end for you as violence, right? So my perception of what is violence is sort of on a different teeter-totter scale than others. Some people put violence as in what a person does to another. Well, that still capitalizes on what society does to those most marginalized. And so for me, violence is another form of genocide down that line, because it's not hard to create a problem and associate that problem with these people. And then once you, because these are the steps to genocide that sort of happen organically. And then you want to just confiscate and search those people because of the excuse of that problem. And then it's not too hard to start taking their property. When that's done, once you violate the first, second, third, and 14th Amendment rights, then you can just start taking the people, you know. And then you just say, you know what, let's just get rid of them.
Yeah.
And so we've seen these steps through Outswitch and those construction models and other models that built the projects. Like literally, we've seen these steps targeted toward people of color. We've seen hundreds of years of black codes where just a little bit of chipping at the rock of slavery turned it into a controllable business formatted professional system of incarceration.
By the
And
government.
so yes, I believe 90% of people shouldn't even be there if we had human rights.
So what about the fact that, you look at it from the perspective, I think, we all have loved ones who are incarcerated. We're all impacted by incarceration. The concept of abolition, when it's mentioned to certain people, it's almost like, hey, there's a rig of paint over there. Why don't you go jump in it? It's just too drastic in nature. And so I think that a lot of people really struggle with the concept that it's possible because they know people who have done horrible things or are in prison for things, and a lot of times we don't look at how a person got to that place, because that is a huge component in how people end up in prison. How did you get there? What were the contributing factors? And so I think that there's two different groups of people, right? Not necessarily just reformists and abolitionists, but there are people who recognize that prisons are not doing anyone any due diligence. I mean, they're just not. It's warehousing. You're basically just taking advantage of the taxpayers and also the victims on an astronomical level, because it's not as though you're providing a victim or a victim's family with any level of healing through incarceration. Although we've been programmed.
Past additional incarceration. That's all they offer you.
Yeah.
It's additional incarceration. Right?
Yes, because now you don't know anything about the process that a person has taken as far as a path of redemption to change their mindset or their behaviors. And all that you know, as someone who has been impacted by trauma from someone, is when they get ready to move locations in many instances and when they're petitioning for release. You don't know that this person has spent the last 7 or 8, 9, 10 years working on changing the person or the mindset that they've had in order to become a better person, to be
Right.
a contributor of society. But there isn't an opportunity for that. And so I just think that it's very difficult to try to get people to understand how it is possible, as opposed to just you know, changing laws that kind of sort of offer some some free, some
Right.
freedom, but not really.
Right.
Mhm.
You know, some people's leverage or some people's idea of change is, I was taught differently by the Panthers and the elders who teach the non-traditional form of incarceration or really justice. And so you have this system that is like, the evolutionized form of slavery. It has a lot of different nicks and changes. There's been a lot of changes since down the line. Like we don't have to like not look at white people anymore. Like that used to be a crime, like walking on the right side of the street to the left side of the street. Then you couldn't have chickens because eggs are a commodity. Hence the reason why they say black people love chicken. Like all of these sort of 100 years of degradation, right?
Mhm.
You have this evolutionized version, but it's not a real version, right? People who, and this is my problem, other people consider themselves a reformer. I work with a lot of, I have friends who like, I'm a reformer. I do believe that we need to close prisons, not all the jails, but some of them. And it's a concept built on the rules of this evolutionized form of punishment. Whereas the non-traditional form is you have to include the environment. You have to include the fact that this person's color includes a holdback from resources that didn't allow them to succeed. You
Yeah.
have to include what was happening in that environment, the opportunities in that community, if there was an environment or if there was an impact or a crime or something in that community. You have to look at the other options, the other factors. Was this person working? What was their needs? What were their wants? Like we had people locked up for stealing food, or basically the end game was food because they stole money, but the money was to buy food, right? And so was it a survival crime? Was it a crime of necessity? Was it that your neighborhood and looking at the government, all these other resources that they have that they use to create these situations and circumstances, right? When I look at a case like Freeway, right, who's previously incarcerated, did a bunch of time in prison, basically supplied the whole East Coast with crack cocaine. His movie's called Crack in the Freeway. He's the real Rick Ross. He's in prison for like hundreds of kilos of cocaine. He was getting 100 kilos every week from every day from the CIA. And who revealed that was Oliver North in the Iran-Contra scandal. Like the government, Reagan, was sending money to the Contras, liquidating the cocaine that they was bringing in from Iran, from the Contras, from the Contanistas, dropping it off like always dropping off an alien in his black neighborhood, giving it to him. Blandon, the agent, literally bought arms from Iran to give to them to fight the war. This is the Iran-Contra scandal. Right? How about my godfather when they told him, like, listen, just open a funeral home. We're going to ship heroin in the military bodies to you. Right? And so all of this is like common knowledge. You can look at this on Netflix.
Mhm.
Yet we don't take that into consideration when we're talking about drugs, with 80% of people in prison for war on drugs, for small amounts and sentencing and mandatory minimums and all these sort of little evolutions of slavery. And so in that concept, it doesn't make sense. But when you have to factor in a person's mental health, their welfare state, and all these other things in the environment. When I'm in a room, I throw the ball against the ball falls back. I have to include the fact that there's a limit to where I can go.
Yeah.
They don't even want to admit the wall is there. They don't even want to admit you in the house, right? Like, and so I think that there's inequality with the scales of justice tilted, but there's inequality in that form. There is no jury of peers and impartial judge. The whole system is rigged. And so it's stacked against us. And I say that inequality, you can't say that you need adjustment of that and you're going to reform that. It has to be abolished and restructured for the benefit of society. And it starts with creating human rights. or equal rights or gender rights.
What do you think? And I'll give you a little bit because you gave us a lot. What do you think that are some progressive steps that we can be taking just all across the country in different states in order to, um, kind of be moving things in the right side of justice? What does justice really look like? What, from the abolitionist perspective, what does that mean? How does that look? How would I present that to a legislator? How would I present that to someone who is looking to break down a system that was never intended to work for healthy growth reasons and rehabilitative purposes, to then be able to kind of say, this is the direction in which we need to be going? What does that look like?
Um, for me, can I just say how I look at it? Because I think everybody should is different, right? I think everybody should is different. How they look at it, how they lens, sort of how they lens is and what their cultural lens is made up of. For me, I look at it like you literally are attacking me. I take that personally. For people of color, we react a certain way when we're attacked. We very know well how to defend ourselves,
Yeah.
but we sort of act corporate when we're in their corporate setting, in
Yeah.
that concept. I take it like we have beef. If you're my legislators will tell you, like I'm at your house, I'm finding out who on the block know you. I'm at your son's school doing film screenings. Like, hey, your pops could change this. Like I'm literally on your back, like you're hurting me. And I'm gonna be at your office outside, all the Hooters from the hood, waiting for you. Like we're gonna have a conversation about this bill because this is your job. Number two, you don't have to come to me. I will bring everybody in your district to your office. The old mamas, I'll put them in a van and get them there, and we will run down on you. I'll boycott your office, and they'll be out front, right? And so that's how we have to take it, like we're being attacked, because we're being attacked the same way. I'm
Yeah.
not gonna go for that. Like the purpose of defense is knowing how you're attacked, but we don't even have the right to be mad about being attacked, to be upset. So we have to do it in different ways. So I'm incubating student groups, creating legal legislation, using those law groups and leading the law students to create legislation policy, at the same time organizing rallies and got a riot ready to happen if it don't happen, right? So we have to do it on all levels. Yes, we have to ask, but I'm also only asking because the 800 people I brought with me outside your office right now, sir, is not waiting to ask. And we have to be that insistent because it is like justice, not now, but like 400 years ago. So I'm speaking for my ancestors as far as what we need and what you're going to do. And I think that it also has to sort of expel a lot. This is why I don't have a life. Um, this is all the work I do because you also have to like create new legislators, right? Like, no problem, I'm building somebody to replace you. She's gonna graduate next year, and then start pulling that up. You also have to teach in the universities and schools because when I started the teaching network, it was to influence the next generation of law students and social work students and other students. And those students told me, well, the problem is media. And I'm like, really, what journalist student you know, right? Because you should be impacting them. And so I've done a lot because this is a lifestyle for us as Cubs. You know, I don't really do anything else. I eat, sleep, organize. Um, it's a priority. Not that everybody has to do that, but everybody within their means should be on their community board, should be knowing what their community is doing. Your legislator has a legal right to hear from you. If your son is locked up, he should be the number one you call. You know, my son called me last night. He's saying that he couldn't get. You should be on his back like your son is on your back in prison. And I guarantee you will have results and then take it publicly. Every legislator's on Twitter. They hate me on Twitter. But I will put it in your face like, hey, I'm here at this place where you're supposed to be at, or, you know, there's an issue here that you need to attend. Because somebody's getting paid to represent you in your community district and in your sector and in your state and in your government, right? We have the power to change that. If you're not registered to vote, you should be voting just because someone died for you to do that. Even if that's just the excuse you need, do it. And then use that as an excuse to go run down on your senator, on your legislator, on your congressman, or your assemblyman. And if they don't do it, great. Do it yourself.
Well,
Do it
from your,
yourself.
I agree with you 100%. But from your
Sorry.
experience in working with the community intervention programs that involve formerly and currently incarcerated activists, what are some of the major strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats in raising public awareness and campaigning for prison abolition?
Wow. So strengths, weaknesses, threats. Honestly, there's a lot of strengths. Oh man, there's so much we have in common. So many things that we align on, that we sticking together will work.
Hmm.
Some of the problems is none of that is happening post incarceration. Like I have post incarceration redirection, but it's like you got to get out to get there. We need to start that day one going in. That's when you transform the prison system. That to me is abolition. You're going in day one. You're working on coming home, right?
Right.
Hmm.
And the process of building that is in community inclusive. Like prison would be hell if every day my nana was there. Like, why are you here? Like every day it would. I would rather a death sentence. So punishment and isolation is not really doing anything but slavery. So community being involved is the way. Number two, um, human validation. The brain is such a part of our controlling device that our tormentors have realized that by damaging that, they can do irreparable damage. It is like sending people out, no matter what time they did in prison, we break them like a boomerang, they come right back. 50% of your business people return is not a failure. That's a great success. It's just the business is built on punishment, manipulation, and the structure of slavery, which was house slaves and field slaves, reformers and abolitionists. And you have people that, like when I was in Auburn, they had 46 cells on each tier, 6 floors, 2 sides, 250, 250, 500 of us. And then on every floor, they had these 3 death row cells for the inmates. The guys that work for the COs, they cells didn't even lock. Like, they're the elephant with the chain in the state.
Yes.
And that concept doesn't allow you to think outside of this fake need that people need to be protected. When you are woke enough to realize the history, your history, your African history, your culture history, and then you see the system as a small part of it, which grew out of that, you can then sort of compromise that, oh, this is a victim take capitalistic system that has colonized people and transformed them into slaves and just found a different way to keep them into slavery. You can see it clearly.
Yeah.
But some people settle for that. Validation is one of the most important problems with all of that because inside of prison, everybody suffers from that, regardless of who you are. You could be the inmate, you could be the person, you could be the toughest guy in the tier. Human validation is something that is ticking away at you. The longer you have in prison, the more you're not validated. COs are not made to look you in the eye. They're told to not talk to you, trust you. You have no communication outside of that. It's a survival mode environment. They put you there, no food, no nothing. You don't have any family, you're just gonna have to survive and take from others. And it becomes this sort of survival cage, right? This other level of society where this county is benefiting off of it, but that's another story. But those black bodies crave for that. I'm gonna give you an example. Like you, I tell my students, you go into school, somebody knocks you over, your school books, like, oh, the guy turns around and says, I'm sorry. He validated you, you existed. Now you could be mad for the rest of the day, but he recognized you, he said, I apologize, I didn't see you there, cool. Can you imagine somebody doing that 100 times a day and not even showing you they exist? The constant subliminal torture. The brain is run by different lobes. The cerebral cortex is what makes you have all your decisions. Hence, if you had a blunt force trauma to the top of your head, you would be, like what they say you must be dropping your head when you were a kid. It actually changes the way that you make decisions. But inside of that is called the somatosensory cortex. It's what doctors call touch. It is basically what your brain tells you that everything is real. And like 14 days in solitary, that starts to deteriorate, right? And so punitive segregation, isolation itself creates a sort of deteriorating effect from the most powerful and strongest muscle in our body, which is the brain. And it creates this environment where human validation craves. Leaders come home and they're on fucking Facebook, excuse my language, all day. Just photo pictures, vacation. They're trying to make up for 20 years of what they missed. And that's normal. I'm just moving forward. But I want to see you on vacation when you got a grant, like especially not 2 days after you cashed it. But that sort of attitude, I can't even contradict it because I teach my kids the same thing. I'm just gonna be honest. I teach them that stealing a bag of potato chips is a crime of resistance, and that the real problem is that you shouldn't have been hungry, right? And so I feel that they need to take that back, but human validation will be the end of it because oh my God, the need for it. I've had brothers come home and buy the same car they got locked up in when they were like, what are you doing? And so, I don't really make a joke out of it, but it's a really psychological that's tearing the movement apart. Because you got people like, oh, they boycotting Gucci? I'm going to post nothing but Gucci. I'm going to rent a plane. Like, what are you doing? And so, it becomes this sort of, I got it, that we have, that has come from prison. Because in prison, people tell the CEO, like, oh, hire me, man, don't work. Slandering, oh my God. Like, the gossip is crazy because that's a prison tactic. I'm blessed. I had nothing but elders and Panthers, and I'm nothing with political prisoners. So even when I was in prison, I was with my Uncle Herman, my Uncle Jalil, and I was on some transforming the prison. I wasn't focused on what this person is doing or individual.
Yeah.
That's good.
Sorry.
Who would you say, like, we know that this work is exhausting. I think
Yes,
you
it is.
said it best the first time I reached out to you, you and Brother Tate. There's no on and off clock to this work. So call whenever you need me.
The
And
lifestyle.
and who would you say have been your biggest allies, your greatest sympathizers? Like who do because even for myself, I look to a lot of other people. There are days when I'm just like, I'm completely drained from people reaching out to me, from me trying to explain or tell the story and change the narrative, have somebody look at it from a different perspective. And just getting beat down by the work itself. Like who are your allies? Who have you found to be some of the greatest allies and sympathizers with the work?
Honestly, it's a lifestyle for me. So it's a combination. Like for me, it's a combination. A lot of times nobody can say nothing to me like I'm done. Then I start thinking like I have never had a vacation. I start, being my own advocate. And it'd be the kids. It'd be the young people. The young people, their strength will like bring you, will just crush you, man. You know, um, and it's inspiring. But I also say it's a combination because I'm kind of unique though, Lou. I have a immense amount of blessings. Like I've been learning from Dr. Leonard Jeffries. Like I was on a Zoom with him the other night. Like God, I've been going over this since I was 12. Like literally since I was a kid, I've been having personal lessons from this man. All my uncles are political prisoners and Panthers, but scholars, right? My personal doctors, even when I came home from solitary, half a decade in the box, like Stuart Grassi and Terry Cuppers, Craig Haney, all wrote books about me, right? Like they are the top 3 psychs on the planet Earth. Like I'm blessed to have so many professional advice around me and so much support. When I was young as a cub, it was the same thing. It wasn't just high school. I had PE class and then political education class. I had to do time over here and then working in the community center and then washing the damn plates at the at the eating hall. And so service has been in my life, and I have so many blessings of being surrounded by so many elders. Like every day I'm with Panthers. Every day, like everything is a history lesson. Oh my God. Not one subject is easy with them, but I'm blessed to have so many resources. But at the end of the day, when I'm down and I'm burnt out and I'm like, God, I got to take a vacation. I'm about to leave for a week. Like something else happened. Like I'm ready to leave. The governor's quitting. He's leaving. I'm like, oh my God, I need a vacation. I'm like, so many deaths during COVID. So many elders and friends passed. And then like the governor leaves and like signs every bill I sent them on the way out and like passes both clemency applications that we had in. And then the new governor signs the Less is More Act. And then I have another, like so many other things just always happen. And I don't know if it's perpetual energy or, this timeline that things luckily happen. I don't believe in that. But it's really for me externally the young people because a lot of them keep you going. They're in my life constantly. It's a lifestyle. I can't get rid of them. And I have houses of them now, right? And so they keep me in my life. They pick me up. And when I'm down, they're there for me because that's the future. They don't have any of the toxic lenses, you know, that other people older than them have. And so for me, they're always positive and they're always rejuvenating. And their strength is just amazing, you know.
Give me 1 second.
But in that light, you I don't have much recreation, so all I do is, sleep, fall asleep, get up, back to work on the same note I left off on. Um, it allows me to achieve a lot more. You know, some of my days are 2 days in a row.
Yeah.
It happens, but this work has to be done, and I guess I'm just a little bit different. But I don't allow distraction, and there's no emotions to interfere with the work are allowed. The
Well,
one rule is
that's easier said than done because some days I am sick and tired of folks.
yes.
I don't want to hear one more thing. I don't care
My
about your
patience, my
personal
people is
problems.
different. My anger and frustration comes from the system. My empathy toward the people is that I research more into trauma, how trauma impacts your body, how it affects our people in a society, how our people, people of color, are impacted even more. That raises my empathy level, sis. When I look at a person, if they flipping out on me, I kind of understand the reasons that they're mad at me about, and I'm
Yeah.
not even mad at them. When I get an asshole cop, a black cop coming at me, I'm not mad at him. I actually feel bad for him. I'm mad at the system that programmed him to be the way he is and showed him that this is the way. That
Yeah.
he's actually fighting for some cause that he doesn't own or win.
Yeah.
And so for me, I just when as a revolutionary, you have to know when to quit and then start over again. And I
Yeah.
do it several
I
times a
think
day with you.
and I quit all the time and I keep starting back
Like
over.
I'm tired, I'm done. Right?
This is like, oh, I'm never talking to that person again. And the next thing you know, I'm like, well, hey, how's everything going?
Right,
Because I
right, right.
think that the people who there are few and far between the people who are actually genuinely doing the work aside from photo ops and
Yeah.
opportunities to build their own name. And I think that working with a wide variety of people has really helped me to understand the need of the people. I think a lot of where my frustration lies is that I think that everyone should have the same fire and zeal that I do surrounding the topics that I'm having and or the things that are openly concerning. And so I just always want to make sure that I am properly aligning with whatever I need to do in order to stay focused on my actual purpose and mission. Because every day people are going to let you down, systems are going to fail, but you have to keep getting back up. And that's one of the reasons why I reached out to you because I've seen you as such a um, strong-willed person and obviously you've been groomed that way and so that changes the way that you move and the expectation that I might have for myself might be a little bit stronger than what most people might have, but I think that just in a short amount of time I've come a very long way in the work in itself and I want to continue to grow and continue to be a part of change and not necessarily just for my own namesake but so that we can look back at something and say that our ancestors are proud of the work that we've put forward in regards to humanity and life and people, because we all matter. And that's just my piece on
That's
it.
what makes you an abolitionist and a revolutionary. Because George Jackson said this. He said, if you have a fire in you that even makes you question why is somebody not as fiery as you about this issue that impacts them as well as you, then you are a revolutionary. Because you're like, I'm gonna show that this is wrong, and I'm gonna have enough patience to even go through it and teach you in different formats. But
Yeah,
I don't even know why you're not mad about this. It's hurting you, right?
yeah,
That's a revolutionary. And so there's a difference between that and the person say, okay, everybody's got their own opinion, and life exists for them because maybe outside their bubble, it's not a permanation. It's not something that's permeating throughout their life. Inequality, racism, microaggressions, like all of that is in us, flying around us like a swarm every day, stinging you 100 times. For
mm,
them, they can move on. We can't.
yeah. I always tell people when people are like, they kind of want to take it on like I don't know, like the Easter Bunny, or, it's kind of like, oh, I want to send, I want to make sure, I want to send prayers. I mean, all of these things matter. Let me not make light of that. You know what I mean? Any effort given is effort appreciated. But I'm like, no, we need to talk to all of these people that we need, have a structured idea and a plan. And everybody just doesn't understand that, especially me being a Black woman. It's not always well received. And so I understand and I recognize that, but I just try to make it in a sense to where we are, understanding that we can all work together in this work and help to build each other up. Because just as though when I initially started working with certain people, I didn't have the proper mindset surrounding certain ideas over a period of time of the education and the listening and the learning and being able to apply what I've learned to move differently and be able to create more change. And so I think that that's more important because we have to teach people how to be the change that we need to see, right? That's what they always say. And so,
Everybody got a lane. Everybody has a lane.
yeah,
Everybody has a lane. Even the ones that they have, I don't like them lane. Okay, great. That ain't going that lane. Like everybody has a lane.
yeah,
And I
definitely.
think that it's only together that we're gonna be able to change the whole world. Like really.
Most definitely. Well, Five, it was a pleasure for me
Yes, thank you.
to have you on tonight. I definitely look to hear more from you. I know we've been kind of touching and going with all of our craziness with our schedules, but I hope that our listeners also enjoyed all of your information down below. And we will also drop in the chat if you are interested in donating to his organization, the Incarcerated Network. Please click on the link below or in the chat as soon as you guys see it, and you can contribute. No amount of contribution is too small and none too great, of course. But we want to continue to support those who are doing the work. And again, I thank you.
Thank you.
This has definitely been a pleasure. I'll ask you to kind of hang around. I know Makini, it looks like she lost her connection, but I know she is thankful to you as well. And to all of our listeners out there, we appreciate you. We hope to see you again on November 29th. We have something, I don't even know, it just took my breath away. We have something amazing in store for you. A very heartfelt story. And that's all I'll say for now. But you guys, thank you for joining us. And this has been another episode of Second Chances.